Unified School District Board of Trustees on this Thursday, November 19th, 2020. The focus of this meeting will be charter business and a fiscal impact study session. That is why we're here this evening on this not regularly scheduled meeting. We've got some important business to discuss, and our Superintendent Larry King will be leading that discussion. So I'll call this meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. Can we do a roll call, please, board members?
Mike Fox, present. Rotc, present.
Ben Jorgensen here.
Kelly Jensen, present.
And I am Ken Fallsgraf. So we're all here. We have 5 board members ready to do the work this evening. Larry, is there anything that you want to adjust on the agenda before I present it to the board?
Yeah, I'd like to recommend that we swap items 4A and 4B. I think it's more important to do the business charter piece first and then entertain the contract for Rotc.
Wonderful. That said, do I have a motion from the board to accept the agenda as presented by the superintendent?
Kelly
Jorgensen. Go ahead, Kelly.
So moved.
10 seconds.
Call the question.
Mike Fox, aye. Rotc, aye.
Ken Jorgensen, aye.
Kelly Jensen, aye.
Board, 4 ayes, board present, aye. The agenda has been accepted as presented. Flag salute. Coach Jorgensen, can you help us with that, please? Apparently Coach Jorgensen is done.
Coach, you're still muted. Did you guys do it? Oh, sorry.
No, we didn't.
All right, here we go. Hand over your heart. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to have to move this from additional therapy. Thank you. Thank you, Coach Jorgensen. I will do the civility statement. When conducting the district's business, we will strive to communicate clearly and concisely with respect for the time of others, listen objectively, carefully considering the opinions of others, understand the counterproductive effects of disruptive, demeaning, and intimidating behaviors, understand and respect the district's policies and procedures, and maintain a respect for the rich history of the district and the efforts of others who have served in the past. Moving on to item 3, we have public comments, recognition, and reports, and it's my understanding that we have 2 people who wish to address us tonight about, one is an agenda item and the other is not on the agenda. I'm going to give both people the opportunity to speak to us. Sometimes these meetings get dragged out late, and I want to make sure that you're given the opportunity. So first, let's go with the person who has an item that is not on the agenda, and can we bring in Lester Mascon, please?
Hello, everyone.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Go ahead and speak to us, please.
All right. Again, hello, everyone. My name is Lester Mascon, and I am one of the founding board members at Aadusd. I wanted to speak today in support of the renewal of the Aadusd Charter. As some of you are aware, I was one of the parents that had to experience the failure of Albert Einstein. Through that process, I learned all about how charters work and I specifically came to understand how AEA's poor financial management and bad decisions led to their demise. It was because of that experience that I became involved at ILEAD. It's why I serve on the board in the position of treasurer. When the position on the board became available, I jumped at the opportunity. I did not want to see another AEA happen. I did not know what ILEAD thought they were getting when I took the position, but I'm sure it was more than they bargained for. I take my responsibility as a board member seriously. I do not represent ILEAD. I represent the families in the community, and I serve on the board to hold ILEAD accountable for living up to their promise. 2 years later, I'm thrilled to say that they have and then some. It is such an amazing school, and it is made that way by the staff, the teachers, the facilitators, our kids, and most importantly, our community. ILEAD has exceeded every expectation I had as a parent, community member, and board member. The support and corporate capacity they have is incredible. We are very fortunate to have such a school in our community. Like you, though, I had reservations when the topic of expanding the charter to include the upper grades came up. I felt like it was a mistake, and I honestly did not want it. I immediately reached out to the leadership at ILEAD to express my concern. After much discussion, I came to understand the program and what it will be focused on. If you are looking for a traditional high school experience or you're focused on sports, this will not be the right place for you. It will be a boutique high school focused on academic and specific career paths in collaboration with our local colleges. In addition, we are working on starting an ROTC program. As a Marine Corps veteran, this is near and dear to my heart, and if I get my way, both of my boys will attend the Naval Academy. If you want to learn more or you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. You can email me at lester.mascon.board at ileadaguadulce.org, or you can call me directly at 661-523-5262. I'll be available anytime.
Thank you, Mr. Mascon.
Thank you.
Next, I have a speaker who wishes to address item 4B, which is, I believe, now 4A, either way. Tracy Costan, would you come in and tell us if you prefer to speak now or when the agenda item comes up?
I can speak now. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
So, board members and Superintendent King, it is clear the issue of decreased ADA is not new. For the past 3 years or so, I have sat through budget presentation after budget presentation with a projected flat growth and the board agreeing to what is presented to them, without ever asking what can we do to address this and come up with a solution, instead of blaming demographics and no new construction in Acton. Maybe there wasn't a real concern because of the healthy reserve and charter revenue, but the increased decline in ADA should have been addressed more thoroughly. There has been no community outreach in our town of 8,000, while many do not have their kids in our district. Neighboring districts have advertised outside their district boundaries on billboards. Yes, it costs money, but clearly money is spent on other things. We need to highlight our programs, Medal of Honor, culinary, handbells, our amazing teachers, other than myself highlighting them every week in our little non-regional newspaper. At last week's meeting, there was reference to a May 2013 school board meeting. In that meeting, there was discussion about addressing low ADA, as other small districts were experiencing similar situations. That might have been the beginning of the discussions of charters, but it surely wasn't the end of all budgetary concerns. I've heard comments that some issues took place prior to the roles being taken on the board. All of you have been sitting on the board for more than one term, essentially telling the community you are the best suited for the job. The moment you're sworn in, you take ownership and responsibility of past and present issues. The crisis is not the COVID pandemic. ADA was decreasing prior to that. The crisis is the ADA issue that has not been properly addressed. Even if it means running overtime to have a healthy discussion rather than looking at the clock to see if you're running past your time. Our students, parents, and teachers deserve better. That is all I have.
Tracy. No more public comment. All right, then, we will.
You're not going to need this during the presentation. I did want to show it to you so you can see where I can just the standard. Go to the next slide, please. We're going to talk about the topics this evening. Go to the next slide, please. We're going to talk about the history of charter schools and revenue and enrollment trends. Next slide, please. We'll talk about oversight fees and again, charter ADA. We're going to talk about our own enrollment trends. We're going to talk about the community demographics briefly. We're going to discuss why you have lost families this year in particular. We're going to talk about the budget itself towards the end, and then we're going to talk about next steps. So you have this slideshow if you wanted to print it out, or if you had 2 monitors, you wanted to follow along, you could. But it's really there, trustees, for your reference prior to the board meeting report and for afterwards as well. I want to thank Lynn David for helping to prepare the slideshow itself and giving the data that I requested. I think for this particular occasion, it makes sense that the superintendent take ownership and do the presentation. So I'm happy to do that this evening for the board. I'm going to ask, if possible, because of the technical setup, if the board can just jot down your questions and comments. The presentation itself, if I just run through, it's about 25 minutes. But because Mr. Falsgraf's microphone will be off, I'll be using the one up in the front of the room. It'll be easier if we hold off the discussion till afterwards, and also the video camera will be over there, not this one over here. I'll be using my ear pods to speak as a microphone, which will hopefully help with the audio. At the conclusion, I'll step back up onto the dais to facilitate with Mr. Falsgraf the conversation with the board. And with that, I will step down and we'll relocate our tech 2 over that way.
Am I still on mic?
Got audio check, and we got video. Okay, and so for Mr. Falsgraf, he's going to be looking at the poster papers, because if he uses the monitor, the numbers will appear backwards. And for the audience, you'll use your monitors and everything will appear from left to right. So, okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is what justifies us doing this presentation. First thing is, we have our gold standard. So we got gold standard 5.0 set by our Board of Education, which addresses utilization of district funds and resources. So we want to be sure that we're using those funds efficiently and effectively and ensuring our fiduciary responsibilities. Second piece is gold standard 5.2. 5.2 talks about our charter schools. So we want to talk about our charter schools this evening and how they relate to our budget and the history there. And so we're going to discuss some of those things tonight. Okay. Okay, so next thing is we're going to talk about charter history. We're going to talk about enrollment trends. Okay, and then finally we're going to talk about our current budget for this school year. And then we're going to talk about our MYP. Because in education, we don't just talk about the current year finances, we talk about year one, which is current year, year two, and year three. So we're going to talk about this year and the next couple of years. Okay, so going back to the beginning of our charter history, just to review the funding structure and the fee structure that was in place. We collect 1% from our charter schools for all the fees that they collect per student. And we collect, and 1% is for providing appropriate oversight. So when we do oversight, we do school site visits, when we send questions to our charter schools, ask them to provide financial statements and documents, that's providing oversight. We collect an additional 2% for providing substantially rent-free facilities and or direct services. When you do those things, you can charge up to an additional 2%. So for the majority of our charters, we charge a total of 3% historically. So in dollars, and for most of you, I know you already know this, but just to be clear, for every $100 coming in, $97 goes to the charter school, $3 goes to Acton Aadusd. 2012 started with one charter school. In 2013, 2 charters. 2014, we added 10 more charter schools for a total of 12 charters. And by 2017, we had 17 charters. So we saw a steady growth in our charter partnerships. And to the best of my knowledge, I think the board has done an excellent job of approving these charters in accordance with the law. They have a petition schedule, a submission schedule, a hearing, and they listen to the staff recommendations, heard them out, and then weighed in. So those were based on the uniqueness of the instructional program, as well as their ability to demonstrate fiscal solvency. In the 14-15 school year, there were about 3,036 students that we had in our charters, which produced a revenue of about $900,000. Okay? In the 18-19 school year, we had an ADA in our district of about 19,192 students because of the charters, which produced a revenue of about $5.7 million. Okay, currently, we're at about 12,668 students in our charters with a revenue stream of about $4.3 million. Reason it went down was because we now authorize about 12 charter schools instead of 17. The reason for that decline or decrease in charters had to do with staff, partly, staff holding charter schools accountable, asking the right questions, asking about their finances, making sure their adopted budget was in alignment with the ending fund balance that needs to be there, just the way the county asks us to share our first interim, our second interim, our adopted budget, our unaudited actuals. We act as the county resource for those charters. So we're providing that service. So these are two important dates. In this month, October 2017, there was a state audit report that came out. In that state audit report, Acton Agua Dulce is one of the school districts named because there was concerns with the high increase of students and charter schools being authorized, in particular by small school districts, and the revenue being produced by that authorization. So there were some recommendations in that audit report that certainly give pause to think about how you're structuring your guidelines, your policies as a district, as the authorizing district, how you're collecting your fees. There were specific questions about that and recommendations. This date had to do with a grand jury. So on this date, both myself and the CBO, Assistant Superintendent of Business, were subpoenaed down to San Diego County because of a charter school that was in default. They were in default for the amount of $50 million. And so that's not that long ago, right? April 30th, 2019. Okay, May, just 1 month later, so 1 month later, there was 11 indictments, May 2019, for this default of $50 million. That organization was called A3, and let me get to how we get involved with this. Okay, so before I go to that piece, just one other piece on this. So this was a criminal case. So what's important to realize out of that criminal case was that there was an outgrowth of a civil case that we recently went to a hearing on. The hearing involved 6 school districts. Because that charter organization, A3, was in default, they were in bankruptcy. So now it involves bankruptcy law. And they need to be able to pay people that are waiting to be paid, vendors and contractors and so on. They can't pay those folks, then it goes into bankruptcy law. And so the 6 districts that authorize that charter, Acton Agua Dulce doesn't currently authorize them, and nor did they authorize them during the time of the criminal proceedings. They'd already left us. But we had to meet with a judge in a hearing along with the 6 other districts and our legal representation in order to get direction from the judge about how those funds would be potentially paid back to the receiver, which is the charter school that was indicted. At this time, as we're going through all of this, our ending fund balance was approximately 46%. What's required by the state of California is a 4% reserve in your third year out. For districts of over 1,000 students, you can have a 3% ending fund balance. But whether it's 3% or 4%, you can see we're well over that. Okay. Let's see. I was going to talk about the civil case here and here, which we already did that piece. The one thing that the judge made very clear on October 22nd, so this hearing we went to was on October 22nd. This was a civil case. The judge made it very clear that in the settlement of this civil case, he would like to see the representatives, the legal representatives of Acton, Aadusd Meeting, and the other 5 school districts, meet with the receiver's attorneys and come to a settlement that includes language that would indicate we're only going to charge for actual costs of oversight. So I'll give you one quick example. We have a charter services director. She has a salary, Shay Patterson. Her salary can be 100% funded by the revenue that we receive from the charters. That's what he's saying would be an actual cost. So he doesn't want to see anything with percent in it, 1% or 2% or 3% or that sort of thing. Okay. What he does want to see is a net zero. So up to now, as you saw those larger dollar amounts of, $3 or $4 or $5.7 million, those revenues became part of our general fund. When revenue streams come into the district and are part of our general fund, they aren't disaggregated. They're there as part of the general fund to be used for the allowable expenditures under the California state law. But when you say charging for actual costs and it must be a net zero, whatever you are charging for must be what you're taking in. Those two things must zero out. So that's a change in the fee structure, drastically different from what we're accustomed to. So if you are looking at the slides, I'm now on slide number 6. So those were covered. I just covered slides 4 and 5. Now I'm on slide number 6. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about enrollment. So I think we had a comment earlier on that. Looks like it might have been fairly accurate as far as the dates. So 2014-15, our enrollment was about 1,083 students. (2020) 2021, we're now at 920 students approximately. So the majority of that drop took place during this COVID period, where we went down approximately 85 students. that is not atypical during this time. So we just learned this morning during a California School Business Organization meeting that the districts in the state of California are seeing losses of 10 to 15% of their student ABA during this COVID period. So that isn't particularly unusual to see right now. And in our discussions with my colleagues, most of us are, planning to do things to recoup some of that ADA. However, some of it is a loss due to the economy as well. So just a little bit on demographics. There's more details again in the slide, but just some rough numbers. 39% of our community is between the ages of 45 to 64. %6 are under the age of 5 years. So it does go towards the idea that for the past several years, we've seen our kindergarten classes coming in smaller and smaller, but this is part of the reason that we're seeing that. Okay, so, and that, by the way, is on slide 7. So there's more demographics on slide 7 if you want to look at that. So where did those students go? Oh, I'm talking about the 85 students now. So 20% of those 85 students went to schools in the AV Santa Clarita Valley. %9 went to California schools. And then 24% went out of state, which again is not aligned with many districts, especially in Southern California, where a lot of people were hit by the economy. And 47% went to charters. And some of those charters are due to movement, people moving out of the area or distance, downtown LA. Some of the charter movements were closer to home. Okay, and again, this is on slide 8. Okay, now I'm going to go to slide 9, which is near the end of our presentation, but really the meat of why we're here. This is the financial piece. So we talk about 3 different things. If I'm asked to look at the fiscal solvency of a school district, I'm going to look at 3 things. I'm going to look at cash flow, look at deficit spending, okay, so let me talk about cash flow, and I know many of you know this, but just for the sake of clarification, we want to make sure that we have cash on hand. In particular, an average of 70 to 80% of a district's budget, total operating expenses, go towards salaries. So you want to make sure that you have enough cash on hand to pay some amount of time worth of salaries in addition to other operating costs. This is your money to keep the lights on. Second thing to look at is deficit spending. Are you having more money go out, more expenditures, outpacing your revenues? And so we are in a deficit spending trend or pattern, and we have been for a number of years. But the one thing that saved us has really been that charter revenue. When you saw those big dollar amounts in the charter revenue, that's the monies that have allowed us to remain, solvent in many ways. And so we are in a deficit, spending trend or pattern. And then the third piece there is we want to look at our ending fund balance. And we want to make sure, again, that the number that we are hitting in our third year is 4% or greater. Now, the board, when I got here, when I asked for some direction and discussion on this, had as a goal initially 8% and then 10%. So those were the kind of numbers we were initially talking about. As time went on and we became very conservative with our finances because of the reasons that I went through here, the reasons that I talked about the October 2017 state audit and the criminal indictments and the civil case, those were all signals that, we ought to be conservative with our finances because of the volatility of the charter world right now. We don't know what's going to happen. And so, sure enough, now we're here, right? We were prepared for it. And I'm very thankful for the conservative approach we took with our finances. And so we don't want to just look at this current year. We look at a multi-year projection, the MYP. And we're not just looking at year 1, 2, and 3 right now. We're also going to look at years 24 and 25, which of course would be year 4 and 5. But year 4 is quickly approaching because we're already coming up on December. So July 1st, 22, 23 is no longer our year 3. 23, 24 becomes our year 3. Okay, so here's where you're really going to be able to see the difference between with the charter revenue and with the idea of charging for only actual costs, the net zero. So right here is with charter revenue. So for this school year, with our charter revenue in the budget, the adopted budget, right? The board, you adopted this budget in June. So we have a 40.3% reserve. When you remove that charter revenue piece, we would now have a 36.1% reserve. Okay, year 2. So 21, 22. 34.45%. Again, this is the adopted. Okay, so you can see that we're still deficit spending, even with our adopted budget, right? 40.3% this year, 34.5% reserve in year 2. And then in year 3, let's see what it does. So here's year 3, okay, 27.13%. Okay. So this is adopted. This is what the board adopted on the top line. The bottom line is with no additional charter revenue on the bottom. So in that, they're both deficit spending formulas or trends, but in the top case, it wasn't really a concern because two reasons. One is the ADA traditionally went up each year over the past several years. So when ADA goes up in the charters, we're getting an increase in revenue, which helps to address this deficit spending pattern. But without the charter revenue in place, now you have a pretty significant deficit spending pattern to the tune of about 15 to 20% change in a negative direction per year. So let's do the same thing, but look at it in dollars. Okay, so this is with the charter revenue. So now if we look at it in terms of dollars, this is the current year. Okay, this is year 2 and year 3. So again, you see the deficit spending pattern. Now without the charters. So you take the charter revenue out, $6.3 million reserve, year 1, year 2, $3.8 million reserve, and year 3, negative $88,000, no decimal. The decimal is for the percent before. So negative 0.49% is the equivalent of negative $88,000 in our budget. Okay. With our conservative approach, and I'm still on slide number 9, so I'm just highlighting key components or highlights of slide number 9. We have assigned monies. So when you assign monies in a budget, in the school finances, you're reserving that money sometimes for a rainy day, sometimes for a capital outlay project, sometimes for a programmatical project or enhancement. In this case, we were assigning those monies because we were concerned about the volatility again of the charter world. So if we kept assigning those monies, here's what it would look like. For the current year, so it's always going to be current year, year 2, and year 3. Current year, $3.9 million. And again, adopted budget. And the budget without continuing charter revenue. Okay, and then in year 3, Okay, so if we were to continue to get the charter revenue coming in, we would slowly be increasing those reserves. And that's why you would see that ending fund balance going up so drastically to nearly 50%. That's very, very healthy. That's very high for a school district. However, again, and this is the adopted budget. However, again, you remove that charter revenue stream and you only charge for services that you're providing. And we have a fixed amount in there. So this isn't 2.4 million and another 2.4 million. This is the 2.4 million that we've been budgeting for in the event that this were to happen. And we would need this money when the revenue stream stopped. And we would be, in this particular case, with, I don't want to talk too much about it because we're involved with the hearing, but that's what these funds are there for. This 2.4 million is to help us get through this case. And so I appreciate the fact that the board has allowed us to take this conservative approach and keep the district solvent in anticipation of this. Okay, so now on slide number 10. So now we're going to talk about next steps. So I'm going to talk about a couple different things. So I'm going to go back up to the dais. We can switch the camera that way and the audio back over there. And then I'm going to make some concluding comments about these pieces here, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Falsgraf and the board. Okay, so thanks for your patience and indulging me with that exercise. Part of the reason for doing that is the numbers are supposed to tell a story. You're supposed to be able to tell a financial story with your school budget and make it in a way that's understandable to all of us. So I hope I was able to do that. As we think about next steps in the first interim, let me go, just find my little notes here. Okay, so the first thing is, I've already been working with Los Angeles County Department of Education in regards to this. Lynn David's had a good relationship, and I think, as everybody knows, her last day with the school district will be November 30th. She's included me on her discussions all along with LACO. But now I'm involving myself a little bit more with LACO in anticipation of the transition and also the financial challenges that we're facing. So I had some great discussion with the county office, the business folks over there, Mr. Hoyt Lee, who's in charge of business services, and they're very supportive of our efforts. They're also going to hold us accountable. But they do that in a very different way when you have a transparent, open relationship with them based on your ability to submit the documents on time, year after year, quarter after quarter, which we've done. So when I showed you that year 3 negative ending fund balance, I have no anticipation, board, on bringing to you a budget that would be a negatively certified budget. And that first interim is due to the board of the county by December 15th. It covers the period of July 1st through October 31st. Our board meeting is December 10th. So on December 10th, pending some of the discussion we're about to have, I'm going to bring to you a budget that shows our district is fiscally solvent. There's 3 types of budgets that get certified: a positive budget, a qualified budget which says you may not be solvent in one of the 3 years, or a negative certified budget which says you won't be fiscally solvent in those years and in your current year, I believe. So I will ensure that you have a positive budget that's submitted on behalf of this school district. I want to go to a worksheet, an Excel worksheet to demonstrate how the district goes about doing that, and then I will turn it over to the board. So let me pull, here's a worksheet. And if you can scroll up just a little bit, it's very similar to what you saw in the slideshow and what you have in your board packets. But if you look at the reserve level, you'll see the 36.1%, and you see the 21.56%, and the negative 0.49%. What I want to show you, and I'll stop here so that I can turn it over to Mr. Falsgraf, is how staff goes about looking at expense reductions ongoing. So right now you see $0 there, but I'll talk about that after I hear from the board.
Spreadsheet good? You got everything ready as you need to? Okay, I think that this is probably a good time for the board to start going through the cycle here as to, do you have any questions about Larry's presentation? Do you have any comments? And let's start with Mr. Fox.
Yes, thank you. So is the budget that you're showing here, that's consistent with only booking actual costs for charter revenue?
That's correct.
Okay. And I mean, obviously, what it says to me is we're going to have to live within just our LCFF allocations from the state, which for us, because of our demographic makeup, is less than the LCFF per student for the districts around us, and that's not within our control, but it is a fact. And we've been cushioned from that somewhat, well, not somewhat, to a very large extent, by the charter revenue exceeding costs. But now that's not going to be the case anymore. So at some point, are you going to show us the adjustments, the kind of adjustments that we're going to see, such that the budget you present first interim doesn't have these kind of negative ending fund balances or reserve levels?
Yes, everything you said is exactly accurate, and that is exactly what we're going to do. I just didn't want to get ahead of myself.
So,
okay, and I don't have any further questions with regard to this part of it.
based on that question, so the rest of the board can be informed, let's run through that exercise as Mr. Fox prompts you with what this looks like. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay.
You know, clearly we're not going to turn in a first interim budget that shows that we go below 4% in year, down in year 22-23. So we're going to have to make expense reductions. We're going to have to make them, I don't know if we are looking at this year, next year, or the third year, or a little bit in each year. That's what I'm curious what this looks like and what that really means. And with those assumed expense reductions, what can we expect to see then for the reserve levels? Do we have a scenario like that you're thinking about?
Yes. So this is an interactive spreadsheet. So I'm going to ask Yolanda to go to the line that you see that says expense reductions ongoing, and she's going to the second column. The reason she's going to the second column is because we could make reductions to our ongoing expenses that'll be effective July 1st. But I also need to share that I'm in the midst of conversations with staff looking at making sure any reductions we've already realized are in the budget so that you can see that in first interim. But in terms of dollar amounts, let's plug a number in there. So let's put negative $100,000. Okay, so the reason that negative $100,000 moves over to year 3 also is because it's an ongoing expense. If it was only a one-time, then you'd see the $100,000 go below the line, and it would not. Okay, so you're with me.
So what happens when you make it minus 300? I mean, I'm imagining we're looking to see 4% at a minimum in the third column.
That's correct. So let's do what you suggested. Let's do negative 300,000.
Larry, let me hop in here for a second. How many people are watching this evening? Huh? So there are 39 people from the public out there watching this and staff. So let's make sure that this is presented in layman's terms so everyone watching this can understand what you're saying. What Mike is suggesting is that the number you punch in ultimately has to be what gives it you a 4% reserve in year 3. Is that accurate?
That's it.
So we can continue to increase that number until, and we can go on for a very long time to do that. So what amount of budget do you need to make? And I'm not interested in talking about where this reduction happens. You'll see that, I believe, in the LACO recommendations when they come back. But let's cut to the chase. What number do you need to populate now to reach that 4% in year 3?
So I calculated a 6.22% positive reserve, so it's not purely at 4%, which was $585,000. So if you want to get to 4%, I can play with it a little bit. Then you put in negative 500,000.
Please speak up, Larry.
Sure.
I barely heard you. Put in minus 585, I think, is what you were suggesting. And
yeah,
we should...
minus 585 gives us a reserve of positive 6.22. And Mr. Fallsgraf was asking to get, what would 4%? What number do we need to do to get to 4%? So I'm suggesting let's put in negative 500,000, and that gives us 5.22. So if we wanted to see 4%, you know, it's kind of a little game there. So now we can try negative 450,000.
Sure. So, of course, I don't know, since you guys are letting me ask the questions for this period, and I'll Mr. President, if you want me to quit, I'll quit. But what clearly ultimately has to happen, unfortunately, because you're right, we'll stay at 5, in this scenario, 4.6% at the end of year 3. Ultimately, we've got to get our expenses to match our revenues. And so, you know, rather than subtracting 450, at some point, we need to subtract 2.5 million. Am I reading the chart right? To get 17.8 to look like 15.3. Now, I'm not suggesting that all happen in 1 year.
Yeah. Yes, you are correct. I'm not saying you're correct about the 2.5 million, but you're certainly correct that it needs to be greater than, you know, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 or $600,000 for us to think long term. And we are having those discussions. You're right on target.
So I guess, you know, I'm not looking to do it in 1 year, but, you know, one might say if we want to get out of true deficit spending now, because we don't have the enhanced revenues to fund it, that would suggest that over the next 2 years, we've got to get expenses down about $2 million.
Roughly, I'd say a little bit less than that, but yes, roughly. And so you have to plan that. You have to plan a tier 1 plan, a tier 2 plan, and a tier 3 plan.
Of course.
And, you know, those of us that have been through the tough fiscal times in 2011, 12, and 13, you know, unfortunately know how to do that. And so we'll do that.
So is it your intention to, I'm just curious where this is going, because, you know, December 10th is not that far away, or whatever that date in December is. Is it to come back with something that takes out 500,000 or something that takes out closer to $1 million so that we get closer to our actual revenues faster. Because, you know, what's not shown on this chart, of course, is year 4.
Yeah, I will have year 4 in mind as we're going through the exercise, and I would anticipate that you will have a positive ending fund balance for the current year 3 and the soon-to-be year 4, because you're spot on, Mike. You're exactly right.
But
To get there, yes, it would, you know.
I guess what I'm saying is, the way the model is working now, it's, for example, 450 in the first year that carries over. So in a way, it's no further cuts beyond the first year's cuts.
Correct.
Okay. To make us neutral, that number needs to be somewhere around, I'll just say over 2 million. Obviously, we're not going to do that in 1 year. But I would anticipate we're going to have to do cuts in year 1 and further cuts besides the fact that the ones in year 1 will have to be ongoing, further cuts in year 2. Because ultimately, you know, we have to fix the deficit spending.
Right.
And I don't understand why we would stretch that out more than 2-3 years at the top. You don't want to maybe do it all in 1 year in case the state comes up by magic and says, here's more money, we're going to throw more money at education. And then, look, we've right-sized and that hurts. And now all of a sudden, oh, they're throwing money at us. But at the same time, you cannot defer those decisions too long. I mean, frankly, we got to come into balance within 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Is that what you'll be showing us?
Yes.
Okay. So unfortunately, that will be year-over-year cuts.
Yes, and you know, some of this is closed session discussion as well.
Okay. At what point will we talk about what that means? You know, positions reduced at all levels and the associated class sizes. Which is, you know, it's unavoidable to have that discussion, but it's better to have it.
Yes. Yes, you're correct.
When do you envision that we'll talk about that kind of stuff?
So on December 10th, when we bring you the first interim, part of that discussion will be in closed session and part of it will be in public.
Okay. I guess, you know, so I'll close after this last comment. You know, it's clear that with the judge's finding that thou shalt not collect more than you spend, we're going to have to live with a revenue stream based on LCFF. It's unfortunate that we get less LCFF than everybody around us because of our demographics. It's not fair, but I didn't make the rule. I expect you to, I will be looking forward to a budget that shows we solved the problem within 2 or 3 years, because I don't want to kick the can down the road. So I'm not knee-jerking and saying in year 1, but, you know, this, I also don't want to, you know, keep kicking the can down the road. At least because of our healthy reserves, we get a couple years to phase in these what I anticipate will be painful changes. But to me, it's you know, only a complete solution if somehow we have an idea how we get to balanced.
Right.
That's I'm done.
Mike, just so you know, I'm going to loop back for final comments to close out, because this part is more about asking questions and things like that. So that said, Brandon.
Hey everyone. So Larry, essentially this is our nightmare scenario, correct? Where essentially if we didn't change any of our spending at all from this current time and played out 3 years, we would not be fiscally solvent in year 22-23, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. For this particular district, it is a bit shocking just because you have this pretty significant revenue stream. But in the majority of my, 30 years in education, I haven't had that that kind of a budget challenge because we haven't had a charter revenue stream like that. So I'm accustomed to dealing with keeping your deficits and your surpluses in line, your expenditures and your revenues in line, so that you realize the balanced budget. But you are correct.
Okay. Assuming we stick to the lowest possible reduction, I'm not advocating for that obviously, but just assuming that it's that lowest possible reduction of 450,000 to stay fiscally solvent by 2023. Would that be 450,000 on our expenditure this year and each consecutive year, or would that be 450,000 this year to next year and then a reduction on next year's budget by 450,000 again?
No, it would begin July. It would be effective July 1st coming up.
Okay, and it would be concurrent, I'm assuming, correct?
It would be ongoing.
Okay.
Yes.
If we stuck to that and stayed by 2023 at that 4% reserve, how long would that reserve actually last us in terms of salary and operating expenditures?
If you did nothing else, kind of to Mike's point, if you just did the 450 and did not do anything else, there are some factors that are unknown because nobody has a crystal ball. They're talking about some additional funds coming in Prop 98 right now, and but those are again one time. But everything being equal, we're looking at what we call a delta or a change in our deficit spending of about 15 to 17% roughly ongoing if we do nothing else, which means you might have a 4% positive reserve in the current year 3, but it could quickly go to negative 12%.
Yeah, of course. So essentially, it's safe to say that, let's say we stick with that 450, and I'm just using that as a metric that's easy to understand. If we stay at that 450, we'd be at 4.6% in 2023. That reserve would more than likely last us at most 2, maybe 3 months in terms of operating expenses and salary, correct?
Probably not even that long. I think 4%, and I know Ms. David's on the line, but I think 4% is a couple weeks of salary basically. So no, it wouldn't last that. It wouldn't last that long, Mr. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. The reason I'm asking these, I just like to play out the nightmare scenario, like the worst of the worst possible. Where would we end up? So thank you for that. It's good to know, and obviously we need to look at expanding that reserve much higher than the 4% for that particular reason. It wouldn't last us more than a month of solvency. So thank you.
Right. Sure.
That's it, Brandon?
That's it for me right now.
I'll loop around one more time at the end. Tim?
Well, most of the key elements have been addressed, but like on the chart that you have there, Larry, we have the 450 in 21-22. Next 22-23 might come back with 650 because there's an additional someplace else to keep working it so that we get closer to that 2 million mark that Mike was talking about. But the point being to me is that 450 is scattered out on all those different lines because there'll be different areas that you're going to be recommending. There might be this and that and this and that, A, B, C, D, then it's going to total up that, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
So the one, it's like there's no smiling about this because it's something that we have to deal with to make sure that we get to our 4%. Unfortunately, the conservative approach over the past years has been beneficial to us. But all we're talking about here is reducing.
Expect that will happen again, and that way it's a safeguard against mono presidencies and mono agendas is kind of what I'm getting at there. I don't think it takes a rocket science to figure out that if your budget is subsidized by 30%, it's pretty easy to get by, and it creates a false economy. And with false economies come loss of things like ambition and things like that. So it suddenly turns into, if you're getting a cut of the kids' money in San Bernardino that you don't know, it becomes pretty easy not to worry about how many kids are in your class because you're being subsidized to the tune of 30%. Something that's not being factored in here is a couple of things. A couple of years ago, when I first started, I used to make these funny movies about how people were wasting money dumping it into rooms like this. And now what you see is the board is not spending anything. You saw a tennis court, you saw a basketball court, you saw projects like that laying out there. And we knew back then that this day would come and decided we will put that money out there. I'm going to tell you a story about what would have happened had somebody spent that money here in a second. But at the end of it, there's something called disengorgement. And what that means is there's a disengorgement hearing going on right now, and I can't discuss the details of it because it hasn't been finalized. But I would challenge the public to say, if I told you that I was going to raise your property taxes by 2%, to make sure that your road was paved, and you agreed to that and voted to that, and your road never got paved, but you found out that the road over down the road where somebody that's politically connected got paid, I think you'd be a little upset with that. And that's kind of what's happened here. So what the district attorney is saying is, not only should you not have taken that money, but we want it back. Larry, is that accurate?
It is accurate, yes.
So this budget that we're sitting on, some of it, based on the negotiations that we're going to have to go through, again, that I can't talk about, the agreement may be that in addition to that you will not do this anymore. That will be an end product of this negotiation with the district attorney. But they can take portions of our reserve back, and I think that when Larry is talking about rat holding some of this money for whatever he called it, we're putting 2 million over here and 2 million over there. That's what the expectation that they're going to take that money back. If you get the DA coming in and saying, I want all of it back, you could literally find someone looking for $20 million or everything that you saw in that one chart. I don't expect that to happen. Now, had this board not put the money away and went ahead and spent money on tennis courts and basketball courts and things like that, here's what would have happened. The DEHISA superintendent in this case, which is the Mosaic of Valiant case, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, is under criminal indictment. And why is she under criminal indictment? Well, because she spent some of this money on things like brand new school buses. I don't know that brand new school buses are a bad thing, but they also spent it to give full ride health benefits to all the employees of the district. Well, guess what? When one employee in the district gets full ride health benefits, then all of a sudden, oh, through Me Too clauses, the superintendent gets full ride benefits. And so what happened is this turned into misappropriation of funds. Now, I know a little bit about the law, enough to make me dangerous, but at the end of the day, you have, and this is unheard of, you have the same judge handling the criminal side of the case as you do handling the civil side of the case. So after you have a grand jury, and at that grand jury thing that Larry's talking about, he could not even share what was happening there, the nature of the questions, the nature of the intent of what the DA was doing with his own board. He was under gag order. But you don't have to be blind to see that was coming. You could have looked at the auditor's report. The state auditor is investigating you for what was the lead into a criminal thing. So Larry finds himself in a position of, why don't I go out and buy brand new buses? Why don't I build the tennis court? Why don't I build the basketball court? Had the board decided to do these things, some people in this district would have been under criminal investigation and charged with fraud, felony, misappropriation of public funds. And I don't care who likes it that I said that and who does not, because it's a fact. Now, I'm going to say this. I've waited 3 and 4 meetings for an MOU that could affect what it looks like when our kids finally come back to school. Does anyone have any idea when someone can finally deliver MOUs that will tell us what the current cost extras are going to be to our budget for putting someone in back in the classroom? And the answer is obviously I don't know, or it would have been on the agenda. It was supposed to be on the agenda. So whoever is looking at that, look at our budget and ask yourself, do you need something that I can't give you right now? I want to go back to the fantasy of this whole thing. All this mess started in about 1999 when Richard Riordan backed Caprice Young to sit on the school board for Los Angeles Unified. If you trace most of these charters back, they go back to that time frame. So there was rapid expansion of school building. Our own Max, who lives in town, I won't embarrass him by saying his last name, was a project manager. All of his schools were DSA approved. But anyway, a bunch of these charters were approved. Then through political climate, Miss Young was not on the board anymore. And so these people were looking for places to go. And at some point, Miss Young herself sat out in the audience and came out here as a consultant and sold us a starter kit on how to sponsor some of these charters that go back to her days on the school board. So if you look in the records, we paid her $6,000 to show us how to do this. About the same time, LACO was telling us, you are in a FICMAT report, meaning that you are in negative certification. So I sat out in the audience and watched this, and the district took up charter revenue as a means of getting us by for the next 6 or 7 years, whatever that was. And we did good there for that. We really did. But these fluctuations you see, if you know the district's business and you know the district staffing, you started seeing fluctuations when a superintendent left. You started seeing people serving as consultants that were superintendents and former employees negotiating with us on the way out while they were moving their attendance on their charter that they developed off the back of this district over to Keppel and ultimately to Apple Valley. Easy to find. Then came the day of 4/27/17. Pull up the movie, people. I had Justin Schmidt standing up there. I refused to vote. I wouldn't even give him a no vote. I said, look, you're not giving me the information I need here. Well, the information did come out, and it came out through the DEA. So I did not disgrace myself by even honoring these people with a vote. And if you watch that movie, again, like I said last week, I'm not psychic and I can't tell you the horse races, but any idiot could see this coming. Now somebody is sitting in Australia running around hiding from the federal authorities with $50 million of that kid in San Bernardino's money. And we're left holding the bag. There's been a false economy created here. And this board is not the brunt of it. And the only reason that we're not in negative certification right now is this board and the people in the school district that run the finance have been very, very conservative. We are going to, you can bet that the DA is going to look at this board meeting tonight because they are about to meter down what they're going to do to us from the court. So I thank you, Mr. Justin Schmidt, and all your friends that stood up here, and I thank the board members who were there that night, who are no longer on this board, who sat there and scathed me in that movie. Thank you. Staff, please do everything you can to reach out to LACO, because we're in the exact same position we were in 2013 when LACO issued a FICMAT report. The only thing that we have done is built personal wealth for some individuals who are under criminal indictment or felon, whatever you call them, people that drift and run away. Now the last thing I'm going to say is this. 1505, the Charter 1505 piece, Assembly Bill 1505 allows board members, when charters come to us now, to say, hey, we want to renew, we want to do this or that. You can, for the only reason, is tell those charters, you are affecting the district financially. And so we're not going to approve you. So we can flop from going, hey, as long as I don't know the kid, as long as I got 30% of my budget being subsidized, I don't care. But now all of a sudden, when you're standing in front of me and you've produced a system that works and you're producing outcomes and the kids in your community decide to choose to go there, don't expect me to flip-flop over dollar. We put ourselves here, and I'm not going to betray the children in this community to the choice where they go. They can choose to come to our school every day, and hopefully we'll get good enough to make sure that they do. That's enough for me. I've said a lot of incendiary things that are insulting and not representative of a good board member. I should resign right now because I told y'all this would happen before, and it is happening. So that said, I will shut my mouth and go back through the board. Anybody got anything they want to say?
Oh, I do. We're circling back. Thank you. Can you go back to or refresh my memory, Mr. King, on what our enrollment drop was this year in total?
Sure, the total
Was
enrollment.
it 85 in total
Correct, yes,
associated with the COVID thing?
yes,
85.
that's correct.
Okay. And I think you said somewhere around 40 to 50% were to charter schools, not out of state or things like that.
Yeah, 47%, that's correct.
Okay. So maybe in a happy scenario, we might get half of those 85 kids back. So I'll call that 50 kids. And at LCFF of about, what is it, approximately 10,000 a kid, that's about 500,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, when I advised you that I would be looking for a budget that shows balance in 2 to 3 years, I do think that it's reasonable to do it over the 2 to 3 years because perhaps some of those kids will come back and we'll get back to our more ambient level of students, which is somewhere around 1,000 plus, as opposed to 920. And so if we don't give ourselves all the pain in year one, we might actually see some kids come back. And so I agree with you or with what you put forth or what I expect to see, which is getting into a balanced budget over 2 to 3 years. I disagree. I don't know. I'm not, it's not personal or anything like this. I do disagree with Tim. I don't think it's sufficient to just hit the 4% in the out years because that suggests that we're still not rapidly enough solving the deficit spending problem. And that just means the next year we're at minus 12 or something like that. So what I would expect to come to me is something that cures the deficit problem in over 2 to 3 years. If students do come back after the COVID thing, then those cuts in the out years will have been, we won't have to make them in the second or third year. Does that make sense, Mr. King?
It makes perfect sense, and I just want to respond to 2 things that you said when you're done.
Okay, and then lastly, I do know the governor's budget is coming, to what Ms. Jensen suggested. I don't have tea leaves any more than anyone else, but I don't know how it could be substantially higher. I think if anything, there's going to be pressures for the budgets to be lower because of the rates of unemployment and what COVID's doing to our economy. So I don't think that's going to bail us out. I think that's just going to make things, if anything, harder. So I guess when we get together again in December, as I said before, I think we really need to have a multi-year plan that gets us into balance within 2 or 3 years. And if things go our way and the governor finds money, even in a poor economy, then we don't have to institute the follow-on cuts in the subsequent years. If kids come back, then we don't have to institute the follow-on cuts in subsequent years. But I really think we need a plan that gets us to balance within a couple of years, because the funding source for being out of balance is gone. And lastly, I agree we should do everything to just, we need to make a plan that brings us into balance. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mike.
Can I respond to just a couple of things?
Please.
Okay, so just a couple of things you brought up, Mr. Fox, I want to respond to, and it was also brought up. We have a structural deficit, and I know we all know that, but I'm bringing it up in the context of bringing students back. The ADA, if you use your number of roughly $10,000 per student, that's what we get for our ADA. 70 to 80% of that, goes towards salaries, goes towards operating expenses. So that's a ratio that continues to stay in place. So, and I realize students don't come in nice neat boxes of 22nd graders or 30 11th graders or 37th graders so that they fit with one teacher. Point being that your staffing and we kind of call it right sizing, right? Your staffing needs to fit the number of students you have. And so your point on balancing the budget long term is exactly what we're looking at, regardless of the number of students. And I like to see families choose to go to our district for the reasons that have been stated. We have great teaching going on. We have wonderful, dedicated teachers at every grade level. We have a wonderful, dedicated classified staff and committed technology department. We have a couple TOSAs now doing a fantastic job. So there's all kinds of great reasons to come to this district, and I would love to see that. But I just didn't want to leave the board or the public with the impression that more students balances the budget. Because again, you just break it down per student, it's that slice of the pie is the ratio of what you need to operate as a school district. And that's why the funding formula exists.
You're absolutely, of course you're correct, and I stand corrected. Students come back, the funding comes back with them. So it just one more piece that says we do need to come into balance with an assumed student count.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Of course.
Brandon?
So I've always been of the belief that we should plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I imagine most people in a circumstance like this are very similar to me. At the end of the day, seeing this and knowing assuming what's coming, we should plan for ultimately the charter revenue to be lost, ADA to stay at the rate it is due to COVID, and we should ultimately plan for the worst outcome and how can we stay afloat. With that being said, I mean, I know the board as a whole, our first priority has always been to the students and as such, the teachers, faculty, staff, and obviously seeing something like this, it's alarming. It's alarming to the district, it's alarming to the teachers. So my biggest question is, do we have any plans going forward to pursue possible additional funding, assuming that the ADA stays the same and that the state budget isn't in our favor? If we don't, can we pursue looking into that? Looking into something, any possible way to get additional funding anywhere possible?
So we do look at different things, and mostly in the way of grant opportunities. And when those come across our desk, we definitely look at those opportunities. Short of that, Mr. Rotc, sometimes there's the availability of say state matching funds for certain projects, but those are the places that we would look for additional funding.
Awesome, thank you, Larry.
Sure.
Tim? Tim, we need to unmute you. Last call for Tim.
Oh, I see it now. So he's muted.
Sorry.
I think he's trying to talk.
He's muted again.
Yeah, ask him to unmute. I
There
think
we
there's
go.
a.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, sir.
All right. No, so it doesn't, there's not much to be said other than the fact that there's a lot of work that staff's got to do. And when my references to the zeros is that I'm hopefully anticipating that the recommendations are going to be spread across so that it's going to have an equal, a balanced approach, because there's not going to be any one entity of our organization that should be able to carry the burden of these reductions that we're going to have to come up with, and it's got to be across the board. And then we just don't lose sight of the fact that I don't know that we're, a year or two, might be a whole year before we get through this COVID thing. So who knows when those ADAs are going to arrive, but we always want to look forward to those and be receptive. So getting to the 4% and staying there and trying to stay focused on that, getting out in the 1 and 2, 3 years, that's fine. It's got a lot of work to do.
Kelly.
I don't have anything else to really address. I think we covered most of the things that I would like to talk about, but perhaps I could recommend that we could also update, the board I think is familiar, but update the public about AB 1505 and some of the new charter laws so they're familiar. And just kind of letting everyone know, in the past, it was very hard to deny a charter school with the charter laws, and that was difficult. And then they could still go to the county, and they could still go to the state. So I think it's important to kind of do a little study on that as well, so people are familiar with the new laws. So when the board is making decisions and having conversations, that our public's a little more informed about the new charter law. If you guys agree with that, would be something that we should discuss. Yes?
Is that it, Kelly? Okay, guys, thank you for each of your expertise. This is I believe the last meeting that I may open the next meeting as a president, but I will not be president of this board again, so take that for what it's worth. Some people may be confused. When I call for a vote, I always say, I announce the board's vote and then my vote, and some people may not understand that, but what I try to do is show the public that the consensus of the board is this or that, and that the board president's vote really doesn't mean that much in the end. It's just one vote. And I've really focused on the work that the rest of the board members do. They each bring a specific expertise to the table. And they include literally a rocket scientist, an educator, and people that have served the public, graduated from our schools and stuff. So I will say this. It sounds to be like doom and gloom, but I'm not running again, but I will remind you of something. When I ran for the board, I had 3 campaign promises. Get the book, look it up. It said, number 1, I wanted to reduce fiscal dependence on out-of-boundary charters. I wonder why I wanted to do that. Well, now you know the answer. The second one was restore focus on local students. That sounds like we needed to do that too. And finally, restore the good name of the district in the greater educational marketplace. So back then, people were suing us You couldn't open up any career things with other districts because they didn't want to be associated with us. I want to tell you that the things that we're thinking about having to do right now to fix those things have already been done. Tracy Costan spoke to us tonight, but she's been wearing herself out with that newspaper trying to highlight our staff, our students, and our schools, and has done a wonderful job doing that, but Tracy's not the impetus for that just because she has the power of the pen. It's the people that she's featuring that make the difference. The community participating in things like the strategic plan, the gold standard, the things that we're measuring ourselves to. You remember Mr. King started off his presentation this evening with where does this fit into the gold standard, or why are we talking about this? So that this district has become very measurable in its performances and how it's reported out. That ties back to the LCAP. I want to talk a little bit about the schools, the site groups, the site councils, the PTO people. They've been highly engaged. They're doing everything they can to attract students and to talk about, very frankly, with staff members about what the expectations are, some of the community's concerns, how to celebrate what the community finds the district doing successful. And then, again, the strategic plan, the gold standard. These are all things in a conservative spending approach. So this isn't something that we've seen, but the days of mono presidencies and staff that are spending a couple years here to build up their own income level, and those are far gone. And I am very proud of the work that the board has done. It is now my role as a president to say, I think the consensus of this board, at least the other 4 members, if I'm hearing them correctly, is that the superintendent takes the reserves that we've built, looks at the different programs, and makes recommendations to us that get us to the numbers as quickly as possible. Is that accurate, board? Does anyone have an issue with me with the way I've characterized that? You're expecting Mr. King to bring back a balanced budget.
That's accurate.
Okay. The thing I will add as the president, I don't think we need to start diving into the bushes about this and that. I don't see us hiring people immediately, especially at the top end here. I think we need to be as conservative as we have been. I went on a rant before, and I'm going to stay on that rant. If you need something right now from this district and it's an MOU, let's get that wrapped up and let's get it up here so we know what our costs are. But I think LACO is there to help us. LACO has been, last thing I'm going to say about this, LACO has been sitting back and watching us fund ourselves, this district fund ourselves since 2013. They know what's happened. And so it is their obligation as the overseer, just like it is with us as overseers of charters. If we know they're doing something wrong, it's our obligation. And I think some of the number fluctuations you saw in the charters was from this board asking real questions about the charters. Do you do this? Do you do that? And I think that has also been a successful process. But that said, I think we need to make general recommendations about where the money comes from. LACO will use their team to analyze it and make some suggestions about where those things come. And then we can go into it measurably with the support of the oversight agency rather than doing back a paper napkin, lick your pencil calculations that they're going to come back and say that they don't like anyway. Larry, I applaud, I think on behalf of the board, I applaud the conservative nature that Lynn has had, you working with her, and also the work you've done to promote our schools in the community. And with that said, I think we're done with this item. Okay. Let's move on. I think you have a consultant agreement you want to discuss with us, Larry, which is consulting agreement between Pearl, Izuka, and Aadusd Unified School District not to exceed $50,000 term of agreement 12/1/2020 to 3/1/2021. This is an action item. Will someone move this in, please?
This is Kelly Johnson, so moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Larry, please introduce us, and I've read what the scope of services is on this. I'm particularly interested that, anyway, introduce it, I'll have my comments later.
Sure. So as the board knows, Ms. David's last day is November 30th, 2020. The first day of this proposed contract is December 1st, and the last, it would go through March 1st of 2021. If there's a need to extend it beyond that, I would come back to the board in advance of March 1st, well in advance, so that we can discuss that. We just completed the budget study, as you saw, demonstrating the need to have somebody that I can work with the fiscal background experience to support our efforts to ensure fiscal solvency. I spoke earlier about our relationship with LACO. Part of my vetting out Pearl Azuka was I spoke with the folks at LACO that are familiar with her work. She has quite a resume. She's been retired for 9 years. She's worked with several school districts to ensure their fiscal solvency, and she's got quite a reputation in the world of business and education. And the fiscal impact, I'll just talk a little bit about that. The fiscal impact you see before you does not exceed the current fiscal impact if our CBO were to remain in place for those 3 months. In fact, of course, you're not paying the statutories that are in place for a permanent employee, permanent management employee. So you're not paying retirement, you're not paying vacation leave and sick leave and those sorts of things. So as we're approaching the holiday season and Pearl's not working on those days, you're not paying for those days. And so in addition, any work that Mrs. Zuka does do for the district will be under my authority, and we'll work together to establish a schedule.
All right, let's run through the board on this, please, Mike.
Yeah, it seems, it may seem on its surface ironic to approve a consultant in finance when we just talked about our finances, but frankly, it's the most important time to have good financial background in the district. And with Miss Davids leaving us, now is not the time to go without a business director. The fact that it costs less than if Miss David had stayed is beneficial, but certainly we need this expertise to help us get through the numbers and especially now get through this these challenges. So you have my support.
Thank you, Mike. Brandon?
My only comment was regarding the expenditure between Miss David and Miss Azuka. So Larry, you hit that on the head. Thank you so much. And to what Mike said, ultimately, right now is the time when we need someone experienced, we need someone strong, and we need someone that can hopefully help us navigate this issue. So with Miss Azuka's credentials, her history, I'm very confident.
Thank you, Tim.
I have no comment on it. Well, just go ahead.
Thank you, Kelly.
No comments other than what Mike and Brendan said, that it's necessary, so support.
Okay, my comments are this on the hiring of this consultant. Was it your intention to eliminate the chief business officer position anytime during this fiscal year?
No.
So therefore, had Lynn chose to stay, her contract would have been up for review at the end of the fiscal year, is that correct?
That's correct.
The district would have been obligated to pay that salary to the end of the fiscal year, is that correct?
Correct.
Does LACO have expectations that you will make typical reports that require the expertise of someone like Ms. David?
Correct.
Has have any of Ms. David's reports ever been kicked back with substantial errors?
They have not.
Wonderful. Ms. David, again, I would just tell you, I would sync your referral so quickly to keep you here, but good luck in where you're going. I saw the scope of services. I hope the public will look over the scope of services. Does this person have any contact with the district in the past?
No, she does not.
Does this person understand the dire circumstances that they're walking into?
Yes, she does.
Yeah, this is not just filling out and populating spreadsheets with the typical numbers. Does this person have the ability by the end of their period of service here to give you a summary of, an objective summary, a non-employee consultant summary of what they think the financial department looks like in its current practices?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, I'd like to see that modified onto the scope of services then.
Okay.
Board, is there anything else? Wonderful. Call the question.
Mike Fox, aye.
Fran Rotc, aye.
Tim Jorgensen, aye.
Kelly Jensen, I.
There's one of those examples. Board, 4 ayes. Board President, aye. I support your decision. 5-0. Let's make sure that as we go through that scope of services in this period of time, I see there's some comments out there about why we would be doing this or whatever. Let's make sure at the end of the service period that there's no more of those questions. Thank you, Board. That said, we'll go to the next item, which is the calendar. There is a meeting on December 10th, 2020. This is time for people to talk.
Mr. President, I will not be available on December 10th. I've said that for the last several weeks, but I just want to remind you that I will not be able to attend.
Lord, I would prefer that we make our appointment of officers with a full board. How do we solve that dilemma?
Mr. Schultz, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I would recommend, if possible, postponing that until the beginning of the year, just for the sake of both Kelly being there, as well as depending on the turnout once the final election ballots are cast, that if we do have a new board member taking my position, that he be able to weigh in on it as well.
That's gracious. Larry, will you contact legal to make sure that that is an appropriate means, that no one's term is extended, that whoever shows up on the winning side on December 10th is recognized as a board member, but we will make our nominations when everyone is here. Just because I've said that I just want the chairs to move down the row doesn't mean that that's what everyone else wants. I would find it very unorthodox if the person who is supposed to be appointed to board president won't be here the night that they're appointed board president. So that said, let's find a work around this. But I want to make sure that everyone who is going to sit on the seat on this board supports the positions that are being nominated by majority vote. Board, anything on that?
Of course, I'll do my very best to call in, but I can't promise that right now.
I've already given the superintendent to contact legal to follow through with Mr. Rotc's recommendation, but again, at the end of it, if you are the winner on the 10th, then you will be on this board. It's just a matter of delaying the board. If I were absent, the board vice president would become this or that. So it's just a matter of conducting business is all. Larry, just let us know before the thing, and make sure the public understands what's happening, please. That said, let's, do I have a motion for adjournment at 8:32 PM?
Mr. President, if I could just make one more comment before we leave tonight.
Yes, go ahead.
I would just like to thank Lynn David for all of her service. She will not be, at the next board meeting, so I would just like to thank her for all of her dedication and hard work. And you know what, she's really been a trooper with the budget. And I don't want to leave tonight without acknowledging Lynn's service to this district, not just as a business officer, but as an administrator. So Lynn, David, thank you so much for all of your hard work.
Kelly, it slipped my mind because I didn't realize there wouldn't be another meeting before December 1st, but I echo those sentiments exactly. Thank you for everything, Lynn.
I think that goes for me as well, Lynn. I know that you've done an exceptional job making sure our reports are fluid and easy to understand. We can see the numbers. Done a great job with that. Thank you, and wishing you the best. And then I want to wish everybody to have a safe and prosperous Thanksgiving.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
So, Lynn, you're the only reason this district is in fiscal condition it is right now. It's very difficult to try and steer this out of the mess that it was when you took over from being the principal of one of our schools. And as I said last week in my comments, they may have been a little bit veiled, but when you're appearing in front of the grand jury and looking at how to balance the numbers, and you go out of here with the numbers you left us with, somebody's getting a prize from you, Lynn. And with that said, I will call for a question on the adjournment of the meeting at 8:34 PM.
This is Kelly Jensen, so moved.
Tim Jordan,
Mike Fox.
Call the question.
Mike Fox, aye.
Brandon Roque, aye.
Tim Jorgensen, aye.
Kelly Jensen, aye.
Board 4, Board President, Board, thank you for the wonderful work you did this evening.